eminently qualified to do it. So if you look at the lore, just wait for this thing to go live on YouTube and mute that because there's a little delay. I really don't know shit about. See, there it goes. There's their reminder. Now that I need another screen so I can feel more important.
So you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah. Okay, we'll record that. All right, thanks everybody for joining in on Sunday night. Sorry I didn't get to it last week. I was traveling. There is I've been looking at the lore in a lot of ways, and I mean everybody's seen it. Everybody's seen me write about it, and all of these great love stories that show up in there. Most of the lore, if it's not Thor on some kind of masculine adventure or Odin on some kind of journey of self-discovery, seeking knowledge, the rest of the lore has a tendency to be about somebody falling in love or seeking a relationship or Loki fucking it up. And that covers a lot of ground there. You, when you want to look at where the ideas for the divine come from, they originate from those things that we have no control over. The weather, war, the ocean, the sea, the wind, volcanoes, and love. Things we have no control over. And if you go far enough back before they understood what it was that made a baby, fertility was also something that we didn't seem to have any control over. And so these goddesses of love and fertility rose to prominence in the making of a home and the ability to defend the home. We all wanted to reach out and grab a hold of, have something on our side that might give us an edge up in a world where it really was one based on our ability to survive. The daily struggle. And we really don't have to go that far back to find people that lived like that. My grandparents, for instance, just in the Great Depression, found themselves in a day and age when survival was not the comfortable given that we have today. Sometimes it was in question. And even today, there are poor people all over our country that, all over the world, really not sure where their next meal is going to come from. We see them on the streets kind of shuffling around, asking for a handout, the under the bridge crowd, if you will. That's a rough way to live. Everything's kind of in question, including whether or not you're going to wake up tomorrow, or if you're going to wake up healthy or whole, or be able to eat something. We take an awful lot of things for granted in the way we live today. We're very, we're comfortable in everything that we do. We can go down to the store, we can go to Walmart, we can get on Amazon, and I've said it before, the shelves are literally groaning with the food that our ancestors might have worked all year to save up to make it through the winter. Now, in those days, there were two types of people that had that kind of luxury that we enjoy today. That would be your royalty, and that would be the priesthood. Everybody else had to deal with the daily grind, so to speak. And the royalty and the priesthood had, they had obligations to meet, but they also had something that not many other people had, that we have a copious amount of today, and that is spare time. We have managed to fill our spare time with a constant stream of news and social media, and satisfied ourselves that we're comfortable where we are right here and right now. And along comes this spirituality, and along comes a bunch of ideas that say you need to be upset about this or you need to be upset about that. Why? Why do I need to concern myself with any of that shit? What's that got to do with me? Is that a selfish way to look at it? It is when it is to a lot of people. But if it doesn't have a lot to do with how I pay my bills or put food on the table for my children or take care of the people that I love, I'm going to look at it in kind of a very pragmatic point of view. What does that, why do I have to worry about that? Well, because people are hurting and we should have compassion for other people and we shouldn't let other people suffer. We should do something about it. What? What should we do with it? We have all of this spare time. We have all of these pressing social concerns. We have all of these radical political ideas that just scream that they should be fleshed out and implemented. We have social clubs that give us a sense of importance and value. And this is what we fill our spare time with. All kinds of pressing concerns as they were. We work, we come home, we watch TV, and we have our spare time. Food's an easy thing to come by. We're comfortable. We enjoy the luxury of kings and priests of old. And for the life of us, we can't figure out how to fucking get along with the people we live with. We sit here in relationships with people and we deal with people on many different levels. And yet when we walk through the front door, you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to come home to the type of home you want to. When you leave in the morning, are you leaving something good behind? Or are you going to have that stress hanging over your head all day long? And there's a literal nightmare of mental gymnastics we have to deal with whenever we even want to talk to somebody, just to say hi. Or if something doesn't quite measure up to the fantasy we've managed to create, or, okay, now what? I don't know how to relate. And our sense of importance is diminished. A value of what we think we are, well, I don't know how to relate to that person anymore. When someone decides to change that about themselves and try to go forward and be successful, say, even in the world of business, well, you can't do that. Who do you think you are to try to do that? Well, I can't do that. And the real fear of all of that is the loss of the ability to communicate and the loss of the ability to relate to an individual. I may not be as important in that person's life anymore. I'm afraid that I won't be as important. Some kind of idea might strike. Well, that's all kinds of resistance is met when somebody decides to change the game. Now, we have all this spare time. We have all of this body of lore and information that has all of these stories about which you could look at and literally solve just about any problem in life. And yet the majority of us would much rather sit around and bitch than actually take a good long look at ourselves. So I started thinking about some of that stuff. And after some discussion with Shanae about a couple of things, where does it show us in the lore how someone might deal with living with another person? I've been through 3 10-year relationships. I've had a host of other relationships. I've lived a fairly wealthy lifestyle most of my life. There have been times I've been shit-ass broke too. But for the most part, I've been fairly comfortable. How come with all of that time and all of these wonderful stories that go on around me, I haven't been able to take a look and fix that about myself? Well, why should I? Everything's disposable. What is it? Something like 60% of the couples in America get divorced. How come we don't find that in the lore? See, there's a lot of tales in the lore where, let's say Frey, he sees Gerda. He goes all out to secure her hand in marriage. All kinds of wonderful things. He sacrifices that powerful phallic symbol of the sword and sets the warrior mindset aside so he can become the loving husband. All right? We see Svipdag and Mingloth. Svipdag goes on this long journey and begins to develop himself and become something so he might meet and fall in love with the woman he's destined to be with. Secure her hand in marriage. We see all three of the couples in the Rixthula, the great grandma, the Emma, and the mother. It says they picked a bride for their son. They lived and were happy. How? They're sitting there struggling on a daily basis. They lived and were happy. And here we are with all of the comfort in the world, and we can't seem to figure out how to live and be happy with somebody. Why is that? Why are we allowing so many other concerns to press in upon our thought process as if they might be that important that they keep us in misery? You see, when we sacrifice the very powerful ceremonies of man and woman making for the sake of convenience, we might go out and make a living and, well, maybe military service will do it. Or, well, you know what, they can go to college and they can grow up. And still nobody's told them how to be a man. And still nobody's shared with them how to be a woman. They're still going to have doubts. Can I have a child? Can I be a good mother? Am I man enough? Am I strong enough to protect my home? Well, I've got a pocket full of money. That ought to be good enough. Is it? Is that worthwhile? It would seem to me that somewhere in all of that confusion, and here we are grabbing hold of a new faith, surely there must be an answer in that. Surely there must be some kind of sign to say, yeah, let's do that. We have some imagery to tell us what not to do. And Loki and his fooling around, the rape of Sif, the symbolic rape of Sif, cutting off her hair, and it damaged the entire community. We have Oder, he goes wandering off to become something more and leaves Freya wandering alone in tears. We have Skadi comes down off the mountain and challenges the Aesir. They pay her wear guild for the death of her father, and she picks a husband based on only one aspect of his persona, his feet. That goes to shit. So we have signs of how to do it right, how to meet somebody, and how to prepare yourself to be somebody worth meeting somebody, how to be somebody worth having in your life. And we have imagery of what it means, how you're going to screw it up if you just run in there with your ego about how important you think you are, and you're going to be all that in a bag of chips for somebody. We see how that works and how it doesn't work. Where does it show us how to keep it going? Where does it show us how to maintain that relationship? Where does it show us how to relate? I wrote a couple of things. See, every man comes across a situation in life where he finds himself to be helpless. This inability to maintain a relationship happens to be one, and so does a woman. We find ourselves unable to help someone we believe we love over a seemingly insurmountable hump in their life. I don't care what anybody says. Every man that's in a relationship with a woman wants to know that he's important in her life. And every woman that's in a relationship with a man, she wants to know that when they're in a room full of people, she's the most beautiful thing in the world in his eyes. They want to feel special to each other. See, it's in this instant when our thinking begins to compound the problem. Our thoughts rise up unbidden and unwelcomed concerning past pain, old wounds, broken hearts, and the corruption of trust. They are almost like an acid upon the bonds that allow love to thrive in a relationship. Because when you get right down to it, a lot of the stories that are in the lore, stories of sacrifice, of coming together, of a community building around each other, a golden age, that takes love in no uncertain terms. All different kinds of love for a friend, for a child, for a partner, for a parent. And yet we sit here with all of our leisure time, and instead of focusing on the ability to figure out, how do I best love this person? We're sitting here focusing on all of these things in our past. All of these thoughts of, well, I wasn't good enough then. I gave it my best and it wasn't good enough. One would think that given the sheer number and complexity of ancient myths from around the world, that there might be some example, some form of instruction as to how a man and woman might love each other. From such grand designs and illustrations, many great lessons to live by have been extracted to the benefit of all, but not so with the relationships. Perhaps it's over our head. Perhaps we are too wrapped up in even trying to have the courage to love somebody that we never attend to the details of attempting to exist in that condition. one of wedded bliss, so to speak. Because the instant it gets tough, or a doubt is fostered by a friend, a well-meaning friend, I'm not really sure, she might be crazy, or he's a man whore, or things fail to go as we believed they should, it seems as if a tidal wave of negative emotion is standing by to delude us with all the reasons we shouldn't. And we begin to slowly poison our own best interest while at the same time bargaining with ourselves that this is really okay. I can tolerate this. It'll be all right. You know, I understand. Blah, blah, blah. The slow death of our hearts as we concede to become victims. Surely there must be some example of how to overcome such a bipolar state of existence for literally the most important thing which will ever happen to us in our lives. Like everything else good in this world, we must be ready to sacrifice for it, learn from it, identify the things which will hold it back, and work for it. Oftentimes, the majority of this work will be accomplished before someone is even ready to meet with a life partner of some sort, such as Frey sacrificing that sword, such as Oder going off on a journey. He returns as Svipdag when he meets Mengloth. Mengloth means the necklace clad. That's a incarnation or a personification of Oder himself. That's the one she's destined to be with. He had to go learn something. How in the world, where might we find the ideas our ancestors might have used to handle the difficulties of growth? Now, we would like to say, well, it was an arranged marriage. They never really had to deal with that kind of stuff. They figured it out or they didn't. But we need to remember our ancestors, the women had the right to seek a divorce if he was a boorish asshole, plain and simple. She had the right to say, no, that ain't how this is going to work. Nope. And there was a dowry set aside for her so she wouldn't be a burden on the community. She would be taken care of after that divorce was over. That was an idea that come from our folk. How in the world are we supposed to find the example which gives us the confidence to unlearn all of those harmful responses to the pain of our love life? Probably not going to find it from our parents, most of whom are divorced. I know that probably the last place I would seek advice for a positive relationship would be my father. I can assure you of that. But now, like I said, for centuries, marriages were arranged. People had to figure out how to make things work, mostly for survival. But as I began, in today's world, where we live with the luxury of kings, we have the time to take into consideration the higher ideals of the relationships concerning men and women. What has happened, though, is that when we sacrifice the formality of, like I said, the great man and woman making ceremonies of old for convenience, we wounded ourselves. In many cases, very deeply. We failed to most properly utilize the allotted time to expand and expound upon the literal power of love. Now we have men asking women to tell him he is man enough, and women hopefully waiting on the man that will make her feel and treat her like a woman. So when she doesn't make him feel like a man, he whips her ass, and then she doesn't make him feel like a man even more. And then, well, it'll really be okay. You don't understand. He gets a little angry and she's a little bit hard to handle, and I'll go ahead and handle it. It'll be okay. We can make it through this tough time, and we'll turn it over to Jesus. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And I know personally people that have gone their entire lives just settling. I, for one, don't really think that we were brought here just to settle. Well, I can handle that little bit of excessive display of personality. It's okay if he's a little braggart, if he kind of stands out there, kind of overweight, skipping leg day, wearing, relaxed fit jeans. And shouldn't we be trying all the time to be somebody worth having a relationship with? What does that look like? How do we do it? Where's it come from? All of the lore. I don't care if it's Kali and Shiva. When Kali goes on her terror of she kills this demon that nobody can kill, and then she gets excited about it. And this woman, this female goddess, this divine feminine goes on a literal tear and nothing can get in her way. And finally, Shiva simply lays down in front of her. She puts a foot on his chest and she's fixing to strike the killing blow. And then she realizes who he is. And their union reminds him of who he is. The intertwining DNA kind of characteristic looking deal of culture and nature. She represents the wild nature and he represents the culture. You have the same thing, many stories in the Celtic legends about men that fall in love, a god of love and a goddess of prophecy and dreams. And the swan is very important in all that, finding the swan with the golden chain around her neck to live happily ever after. Well, that's fine. How's that happily ever after work? Do we just as once and done kind of fucking deal? I'll just do this once and I'll be good. It's like the football quarterback. I'll have a six-pack, washboard stomach. I'll look good for about 5 years. Then after that, I can kind of let myself go because I'm married. That ain't how that always works. You have a couple of options in Norse mythology. You have Loki and Sigyn, whose name means girlfriend. And there's a good example of what happens when it goes wrong. Loki is the uninspired, uninitiated human ego run amok, robbing the divine of their divinity and generally causing problem. And in the end, he is bound by the entrails of his own son, while Sigyn, whose name means girlfriend, has to sit there and collect all of the venom that falls on his face from his actions. And every time she doesn't, she gets berated and he gets burned and cinches up, get me a beer, and you need to take care of them kids and get them kids quiet. And yeah, that ain't what we want. Or you have Balder and Nanna. There, I think we find something truly important. There we find something truly magical. There's other in the Greek lore, but Balder and Nanna represent this couple who grow through some phase of life and they know how to love someone properly. And it's one of the few inspired things that I think that talk about this. See, even a cursory glance across the spectrum of relationships of the friends in our lives will yield glimpses into the weaknesses and the strengths we find in the examples I've just listed. Each couple is a microcosm of the emotions, the reactions, the joy, and the pain found in these and many other ancient tales. But the text is old, and our own thinking may sometimes hinder our ability to perceive what's being told to us. And really, why would we wish to submit ourselves to this kind of thinking? I mean, kind of comfortable. It's kind of all right. You know, she's here, cleaning the kitchen, dinner's cooked. I mean, it'd be all right. See, the pain of growth is not usually a pleasant thing. We lose friends, our world changes, and there's uncertainty on many fronts, especially with regards to this spirituality and faith. What will we look like if we're a successful implementation of these ideas? What are we going to look like? A proud proponent of political ideas of some retard looking for a white ethno-state? Some Antifa joker that's wearing a hammer who hates people because he thinks they hate people? What is the successful image of what it looks like to follow this spirituality and path? I'll tell you that some of the best examples of it are not talking about it. They're living it quietly, successfully, happily. They lived and were happy. And when you think about that very idea, it really rises to the surface quite quickly that it seems as if we're not getting a pat on the back by somebody about the quality of our spirituality, well, we must not be doing it right, huh? Something to really think about there, because that means we're not satisfied with something else going on in our life. We can get on the keyboard, make a shitty comment about somebody that everybody else hates and get a pat on the back. Hey, we're good. I haven't had to do a damn thing. My ego is magnificent. That's great. Are your kids happy? And you have to beat them 3 or 4 times to get them to do something? Are you sitting there telling them you need to be quiet? Kids would be seen and not heard. That's what I always got. What What about your wife? What's she doing? What about your husband? How's he doing? Well, I don't know, but I just made this comment and I feel pretty good about my damn self. We got to move a little bit past that. I don't think it's unreasonable for us to sit here and say, you know what? I expect more. If I'm going to sacrifice all of this thing that I grew up with, if I'm going to sit here and try to unlearn all of this poisonous bullshit that I now see with a very clear set of eyes, I need to think, I ought to be expecting a little bit better standard of life than whether or not somebody approves if I'm part of this or part of that. I think I need to be expecting a little bit more. It's real easy to get into ostrich. You can buy a hammer and get onto a Facebook page. Hey, you're in it to win it. Take a red pill or a blue pill or whatever the fuck pill you're taking these days. And next thing you know, you're a good heathen. I'm of a mindset in this day and age. We need to be expecting more than just validation from people in our own lives. I don't think it's unreasonable that if we're going to make such a radical change in our life, that we shouldn't be able to expect a certain amount of happiness, a certain amount of peace, the ability to be comfortable in our own skin. And we're sitting here with all of this free time and we're not finding it. And that bothers me. Not because I think I'm wrong. That ain't fucking a problem at all. But it means that I don't really have anything to offer my child. That means that I don't have something to tell my daughter that when she grows up, there's some characteristics you should look for in a man. There's some characteristics you should look for in whatever partner you decide to choose. For my sons. And they start by what you look for in here. They always start with what you look for in here. The entirety of this spirituality must at some point begin to reflect the courage to change some of the things in here so we might expect more and better and broader horizons. And have the courage to imagine what that looks like. Best piece of advice I ever heard about this kind of thing was, I want you to imagine what the perfect partner in your life looks like. Every detail about them. Imagine how they're going to treat you at dinner. Imagine how they're going to treat you at home. Imagine how they're going to treat you walking down the street. Imagine how they're going to love you. And then start loving yourself just like that. If we can do that with this faith and spirituality, a lot of shit begins to change. See, there's a boiling chaos of people dealing with all kinds of bullshit. And instead of dealing with it, what we get are all kinds of extraneous nonsense that seemingly demand our attention. We must do something. We've got to do something about this. And yet we never go past being triggered by some kind of nonsense. When shall we do that? What example do we have? Balder and Nana. Let me explain. So when you talk about the story of Balder and Nana, let me finish with this. See, when we embrace the challenge to become a person capable of and worthy enough to love someone else, we set an example which affects all those around us. In a world which daily threatens to fall into the chaos of the mob mentality, and we see it all the time, when two people accept the responsibility to start loving each other, we truly begin to change the world. The success of the interpersonal relationships between a man and their woman in their home fosters untold blessings to everyone around them. Their children have a higher propensity to grow up happy, healthy, and whole. Their grandchildren have romantic heroes and a love story for the ages to fire the imagination. Mothers and fathers especially will enjoy a bit of peace knowing their children are content. I could want nothing more from my children than to see them in a happy, healthy, loving relationship. There just is no downside to it. Yet it's the most difficult thing to do in this world to love someone. Some folks will go so far as to say it may not be a natural state of being, and I disagree vehemently. Be that as it may, all of this stuff we're talking about on this journey of Balder and Nana, Let's think about that. So here you have the high school quarterback, the golden boy, the son of Othin and Frigga. His mother loves him so much, she makes everything promise not to hurt him. And of course, he's going to be the one in charge of the Manor Bunch. Everybody wants a mythic, undefeatable hero leading the troops. And yet somewhere along the way, he managed to pick out this partner, Nanna, Neb's daughter, and they formed a very loving relationship. It says that their home is this wonderful place where fewest baleful runes exist, that people can come to him for wise advice and counsel. And yet, when everybody gets together, while he's the center of attention, they're all trying to hit him and hurt him and stab him, and everything refuses to hurt him. He kind of goes off and starts showboating. And we've all seen people like that. It looks pretty good on the outside. Everything's going okay. But their son, Forseti, we never hear of his partner. Now, he understands how to render a fair and equitable judgment. He puts to sleep all suits in the most favorable manner. Who does he learn to love? And yet when Balder dies, when he makes this transition, because we're not a body that has a soul, we're a soul that has a body. Just like somebody that goes scuba diving in the ocean, they put on a dry suit, they go swimming around, and they come out and they tell everybody what they saw. Same principle. He takes off his wetsuit, he travels on down to hell. She goes with him. Now, how many of us have loved someone so dearly that we would jump into the unknown like that? What kind of relationship must that have been to engender a fearless attitude to join your partner, whatever challenge they might be facing? And right now, with all of our free time, I see people all the time. I talk to people all the time who are dealing with someone. I just don't know if I can help them over this hump. I don't know if I can love them strongly enough to make them change. And that's a wasted thing with drug addicts and junkies and alcoholics. You can love them bastards all you want to. They're still going to be picking something else over you every single time. And it hurts like shit. Yet Balder and Nanna, they join Hel in her realm, and he gets the high seat. They begin a journey that is entirely separate from everything else going on back here. And much like us, they have entered a realm where they are unlearning all of these things, because now all of a sudden they have access to very ancient wisdom, just like us. And they're going to take that journey together. Their path will be illuminated by a black sun, so to speak. And I think that means it might be a little bit more important than a fucking tile pattern in the eagle's nest, which is mostly what I've always considered it. Now they're on a different path. One of the things that really suggests that they've made this connection and have decided to really and truly couple with each other and take this path together is that Balder does the first thing. He takes that golden spoon, that silver spoon out of his mouth. He gives back that arm ring that allows him. That arm ring would allow him to build a gigantic army and be a king. He wouldn't have to lift a finger. He could give out 8 armbands every night and have an army in short order that no one could stand against in whatever realm he happened to be in. He gave it back. One of the first things young men must do to become a man, whether they know it or not, is begin to understand that the greatest challenge that they have is not something out there. It's not a dragon out there to slay. It's something in here. It's the first step. The first thing a young man can do to become a man is to step away from that safety net that his parents offer him simply for being fucking born, from stepping away from the love of his mother simply because he exists. And there's a gigantic risk in that. That's why it's one of the most important first steps every teenage young man does to become a man, is get off the teat. For Nanna, she does this very important symbolic thing too. When every young man steps out, he ventures forth to slay the dragons, so to speak. He wears a homespun garment his mom made him for his journey. Here you go, honey. You won't be cold. Now take that and go on, blah, blah, blah. Right? That's what they all do. It's what they did back then. It's what they do today. Here's some clothes. Go to college. We'll get you some nice clothes. And here's a warm coat. His wife sends it back because she is now adopting the primary role of the feminine in his life. She also sends back hope to her little sister, Fulla, in that finger ring. Because there's a great deal of uncertainty for a woman to become a woman. Will I be able to have a child? Will I be able to be a good mother? Will I be able to deal with, I don't know about this man. He's such an alien creature. He's so different. She sends back that finger ring to Fulla, kind of as a reminder, it's going to be okay, little sister. What a beautiful thought for a woman to do to a sister. So we get some very powerful indications of what it means to begin to take this journey, which is radically different than anything else anybody back in Asgard is dealing with. There's still the same old nonsense going on back there. High adventure and quaffing mead and big parties and wars and battles. And these two kind of slid off here saying, hey, you know what? We're going to take a path not traveled. Now, we don't know a lot about what that path entails, but I hope in writing this book to come across some more ideas about what that means, because we know at the end of it, it says at the twilight of the gods that Balder comes back and all old wounds are healed. That's an amazingly powerful statement. And some people want to say, well, that's a little bit heavily Christianized. That kind of deal of a deity dying and being reborn has been told 16 times that I personally know of. I'm sure there are many, many more. It's very important. It is the shedding of the ego. The idols that people worship are not the physical idols of stone and brass, but it is the mental constructs we begin to create in our own mind about what must be important, what must we worship, what must we follow. They set that aside and they go and they take this path together. And that's a powerful thing to think about. And it's right here in our lore. How do we get to that point? Well, that's also told in all the lore. Sacrifice this, sacrifice that. Grow the fuck up. And if you find yourself in a situation where the path you're on isolates you from all these other things going on behind you, and you're not happy, well, we got to wonder about that. Shouldn't we at least expect a certain amount of happiness following a path of spirituality in this great time of leisure that our ancestors followed? Or is it something that's constantly fostering within us a sense of righteous indignation and anxiety? When we confuse the powerful states of being righteously indignant and anxious about the future for a spiritual experience, we are missing the point. No other way to look at it. There's a lot of things we can get upset about. But when we begin to love ourselves on this journey, I think we have a promise right there, and that we might begin to expect all old wounds will be healed. And I myself have some very deep old wounds I would like to fucking have healed. I don't expect them to happen by magic, but I do expect that if I take a path and do the work and put one foot in front of the other and go in the right direction for the help that I need, I'm going to be able to expect in my spirituality and my faith that I might get to enjoy some of that. And that's the bottom line of it, folks. And it all centers around the ability to love. And it may not always go the way you expect. But don't ever, ever sacrifice the courage to try, and start with yourself. Because we're going on a very radically different journey than everybody else in the world. Now we can start to grow. Now we can expect to set aside some of those old wounds and old things. Yeah. I'm done. Anybody got any questions? It's a deep subject, man. It's a tough thing to deal with. But I think we got to, there she is. Come on, tell me what you got.
One of the things that I've noticed that is missing in so many relationships is teamwork.
Exactly right.
Because, I mean, that was something that me and my husband were it didn't matter good, bad, indifferent. We chose that we were a team, and anything we went through, we stuck together. And that's something I don't see people do. It's all about me, 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 instead of respecting each other and going, oh, this is something I want to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's try it out. Or, hey, we want to go here together, or we want to do that, or make a schedule of plans. This is where we have mutual interests. We want to move together as a couple. And I don't see that. So many people. It just, that's, and why, and I like that you brought up Nana and Balder, but a lot of it is that it was so culturally ingrained in people that they didn't have to think about it. So they didn't write it down, because it was one of those things of,
Good point.
they were so used to surviving as teams. Because if you're not a team, nothing happens.
Isn't that interesting that we've advanced so far that we forgot to do that? I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I hadn't seen my mother and stepfather figure that shit out. My mother was she was a pretty powerful woman. And they figured out that they had to work together, or they weren't going to get, they weren't going to get where they wanted to be. And they'd both been through the emotional ringer with their parents, with previous relationships, and they began to go to therapy to work for this stuff, to figure these things out, to really deal with the pain and the garbage and the bullshit, so that they could learn to operate together. Dude, they live up on the lake now in a fucking fairy tale house, I promise.
Oh,
yeah, and they did it. They did it together. I look at Grant, and I'm just amazed at what they did, at what they pulled together for each other. And it's
and if you look at any relationship that has lasted 20 years or more,
yeah,
that's the key.
I think you're absolutely right. And there, even in that journey through hell, I mean, they have access to all of the knowledge of all of the ancestors right there, and they do it together. They go through together, and she joins him on that. That's a real good point. Probably going to steal that from you and put it in my book. I'm just telling you, because it'll lead to those special moments when you get to sit around, when you find yourself in a peaceful place, you're sitting outside, you feel the wind, and you realize, my gosh, somebody loves me. That's a real good place to be, because intuitively they're going to be there for you all the time.
Those are the best parts of my memories of that relationship. It was all about, okay, well, let's just figure it out together and go here, go there, get whatever done. And it was an adventure together.
If for me, talking about it, it's all kind of new. I've had 3 relationships, and in between each one, I've always had my friend Tia has always been there with all of that. But each time I got into it because I thought I was trying to do the right thing. I've knocked her up, and I'm going to try to love her, and I'm going to try to stand by and raise my child, because that's my child, and I don't want them to go through the things that I went through in life. And I'll be damned to go to hell if every time I didn't make sure they felt the same fucking pain that I felt. And it was just ridiculous. What a ridiculous cycle to go through. And when I turned 50 last week, and I look at it now and I'm like, okay, that means something has to change. Something radically has to change. That means I've got to let go of some of the things that has prevented me from doing and becoming what I'm supposed to become. Of course, I say that, and the damn user warranty went out on me when I turned 50. I had to have a tooth pulled. I gave myself a hernia. I'm like, this is bullshit, man. I'm like 36,000 miles, and my warranty's over. So I'm sitting there emotionally and physically trying to figure this out.
I think one of the things that they had, even the generations, couple few before us, they didn't have this instant gratification syndrome that we have now. They had no choice but to work on things. Now we basically have a buffet of people in front of us at our fingertips. The first sign of trouble, a lot of people are just like, oh, well, that's it. There's trouble ahead, and they they don't trust in themselves to be strong enough or good enough or
Hang
smart
on,
enough.
that's
a big-
exactly right. They don't trust in themselves to be worth enough to endure it.
And I, you know, I have so many thoughts on this. But one of the things, obviously I talk about him all the time. My now fiance is 4,000 miles away from me. We're not able to see each other because of borders being closed and whatever, and it would be very easy for us both to be on social media and to be chatting up other people, or creating a foundation for mistrust or whatever, and we don't do that. Neither of us, like, I don't think my Facebooks are active anymore. I think I deactivated them. He doesn't have any social media, period. And when you don't allow, you make a decision, you make up your mind, this is not going to be an issue, and here's how it's not going to be an issue. Here's how we overcome that obstacle first and foremost.
You're
But
lucky
then,
he don't have any social media, because I would send him a picture.
oh my God, you would. And then I'd get a text at 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd be like, I'm not going to try to imitate his London accent, but he'd be like, what in the actual fuck is this?
It's right. The dumbass redneck from Oklahoma. They say
Yeah,
he's
right.
famous, but
Oh,
don't pay attention
trust
to
me,
him.
he knows all about you, Brian Wilton. He knows
Oh.
all about you. But anyway,
God damn.
anyway, the other thing that I wanted to touch on is something you described as something that I have dealt with on a very personal level, is that whole, issue of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't want my daughter to go through what I went through growing up. And some of the things that I went through were fucking horrific.
Yeah.
And in my path and my journey of not of vowing that the cycle ends with me, I in turn inadvertently allowed her to experience not the things that I went through, but similar feelings. She's felt ignored, and she's felt silenced, and she's felt certain things because I have been by myself doing everything for the first 4.5 years that she's been alive. And so you know inadvertently I became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it wasn't until I stopped and I focused on, and this all kind of comes full circle, I promise. But I stopped and I realized,
Fun.
okay, what
No.
parts of this cycle do I have control over? What parts of this cycle do I need to heal within myself so that they don't, the shit doesn't trickle downhill onto her.
That's
And
that's the importance of the death of Balder and Nana. That's the importance of the symbolic act of them dying. That's them leaving behind all of that nonsense we know about, we are conscious of, but we may not always know how to rid ourselves of. Sometimes we got to have a professional's help. Sometimes we got to ask somebody to say, hey, man, I'm not dealing with this very well. And it's the same thing with Odin on the tree, sacrificing himself to himself, the ridding himself of those old thoughts, his ego, so to speak.
the
It's the
ego
same
is
thing.
it's so hard. But something I learned, a tool that I learned very recently, on this this journey and this path that you have been helping me with,
Mhm.
is the ego, when you are facing things like that, and when you have, I mean, we are intelligent people, and when we have the knowledge, the self-awareness to say, okay, I'm feeling this way, this is my ego talking. And the key is, you don't talk to your ego like, you're stupid, just be quiet, just shove it aside, blah blah blah. You talk to your ego, you address your ego the same way you would address, for us women, your little sister, or for you men, your little brother. Your ego is that, that vulnerable part of you, right? Your ego flares up because it's that vulnerable part of you that it kicks in your fight or flight mode. You know, is this a survival thing, or is this a, you know, I'm not explaining it very well, but
I think for me to apply some of the things, the lessons that I see in the Lord, for me to be able to properly implement them, I have to look at the idea of the ego as those thoughts I have about myself that allow me to perceive myself greater than I actually am without having to do anything to earn that esteem. And that can lend itself, that means it can grow exponentially without ever me leaving this chair because of something I've said. It is one of the most dangerous things that we entertain. I think Young has done some exceptional work on it. And in fact, there's a video that I've shared a couple of times by some of the most prominent fields in prominent doctors in the field. It's a dangerous thing. We'll do just about anything to maintain that perception of ourselves, which is why when somebody goes on a different path, when somebody does decide to go a different way, all of a sudden there's a threat to their identity. And that threat to the identity will result, they will lash out violently and all kinds of dumb shit will come out because, well, I blah, blah, blah. If you doubt that, challenge somebody's favorite football team. Tell them, man, the Cowboys suck. Or in Tia's case, tell them the Steelers suck. And you're going to get a reaction because
Vikings
the identity of
versus the Packers.
fuck.
I don't want
Hey.
to talk about the Packers today, guys.
See what I'm saying? It all
Is that a
comes
college
to the
team?
surface very quickly. We all begin to, our identity's kind of wrapped up in something we haven't done a fucking thing for. But that's our team. And by association, I'm greater because of that team.
We
I enjoy
lost to the
sports.
Lions. I can't even.
Oh,
I can't.
God, poor
I
thing.
can't. It
Poor
hurts.
thing.
I was at the gym and it hurt.
I enjoy watching sports. I enjoy watching these individuals who have built themselves up to this exceptional physical ability. It's kind of odd, but look what they've done. They're the peak of physical perfection. Watching my sons play football, I was so proud of them. But I remember having to figure out that's Darren's glory, not mine. That's Jeff's glory, not mine. And Jeff fights October 3rd in Tampa. He'll be on the UFC undercard October 3rd, Jeff Wilton. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's his glory, not mine. You know, he's earning that right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of him. He's going to fight at 125. But I'm watching him trying to figure some of these things out. And it's really hard watching history repeat itself. I also I see myself. I see these lessons that maybe I didn't really quite learn the way I fucking should have. So now I got to go on this damn path and figure something else new. But I think as long as we follow this faith and begin to kind of grab a hold of the various forms of love, they ain't all passionate. They're not all, radical. That, there's all kinds of them. There's all kinds of different relationships. But I think once we begin to let down some of our wall and just experience it and realize it's okay and start by loving ourselves, I don't think until we do that, will we be able to develop a clear and concise image of what it means to enjoy this spirituality and path of also true, because so much of it up to now has been perceived as a struggle, and it doesn't need to be perceived as a struggle.
Right, exactly.
There's 850 million Caucasians in the world. They're not going to wipe us out tomorrow. It's not
Right.
going to happen. I'm sorry, guys, but so it means I got a little breathing room to kind of grow some kids up in kind of a healthy fashion and trying to love themselves. And then all of a sudden, if all of us are doing that and we've all got 3 or 4 kids in the home, now all of a sudden that's a bunch. And then they're going to do 3 or 4 kids, because if we can't create an environment where a child might approach this spirituality of their own without us having to give them all this other fucking information, if they're getting beat up in a fight and say, hey, Thor, I need a hand. I mean, that might be all it takes for them to become, the kind of spiritually powered people that we need, that can have a happy life. I mean, fuck, when you get right down to it, that's all anybody wants is a happy life.
And when it
And
comes to
Well,
that
and
struggle in
we've
this
been,
faith, oh, go ahead.
no, it's okay. You go ahead.
I was just say, like, I get I get puckered up when people always want to say that this faith is a struggle. Because every once in a while, if you really want to get something out of this, you gotta pour yourself out, put it in the well, and get something good back out of it.
I mean, it's,
And if
you
you
know,
want to,
I mean, when they talk about struggle, I know what you're talking about. I've seen them say it too.
Yeah.
And, you know,
When you approach things from a standpoint of there isn't enough, there's not enough, instead of we should be focusing on, approaching things from a viewpoint of abundance. There's an abundance of opportunity, an abundance of lore, and there's an abundance of tools, for us. And it has to start with
starts with
work
love,
on
honey. It
it
starts with love.
it
Starts with
starts with the
loving
work.
yourself.
Yes, the work on the inside. You start with loving yourself, because when you love yourself, you then in turn are loving other people. And when you love other people, it's I hate to sound like a broken record, but that law of attraction, when you live as if you have an abundance of love, and you have an abundance of wealth, and you have an abundance of knowledge, you attract more wealth, and you attract more knowledge, and you attract more love, and it's a ripple effect. And you start impacting those people. Brian Wilton loves me as a sister in this faith, and that makes me feel really good inside. And so then in turn, I love, Tia, and I love Aislinn, and I love Jason, and I love each of you, and I put that little ripple into effect with you guys, and it spreads outward. You see, Heather, Erin, she has an abundance of joy, and an abundance of gratitude, and an abundance of whatever. And I want that in my life, and you gravitate more towards me, and then you're going to have the same thing, and you're going to start doing the work on yourself. How do I create that same abundance of love? How do I create that same abundance of wealth? And you do the work on the inside, and then you impact those people around you. Does that make sense?
I want to say some of that takes a little bit of courage too, and a lot of people are too scared to do it.
Well,
I just want to throw it out there for the guys.
You gotta be willing to put yourself out there.
It's not really that they're scared, guys. It's not. It's what will I look like if I let go of all this stuff that's made me feel important?
But who cares?
Well, that's
if you're happy.
You can say who cares, but when somebody calls me at the end of their rope, that's usually what's causing it. I can't just tell them to start loving somebody. What I've got to do is help them figure out what they're holding on to that makes them feel like that they're important, but it's also fucking killing them. It's usually some childhood trauma that makes them feel not worthy. It's usually some kind of pain of loss. It's usually some kind of failed relationship. It's usually some kind of thing they want to hold on to, and they've fed off of that energy, because it's real easy to be angry in today's world. It's more acceptable to be righteously indignant in today's world than it is to offer that kind of free love. If you want to learn about love, read Leo Buscaglia book about love. That book will teach you some things. But the first thing that we've got to do, and I think we need to begin to have a legitimate expectation within this lore and this faith, that maybe, just maybe, I can begin to figure out how to let some of that shit that's killing me go. Maybe I can figure out how to let some of this go so that I can enjoy a little bit of, hell, even compassion towards myself. Maybe I can set some of that down and really begin to be aware of where I am, because that's the biggest problem when we can't have that reasonable expectation, or we haven't been able to craft that image of what I want to look like when this is all said and done. Where do we start? Because there's a lot of opportunity out there to get sidetracked. Make up.
That's what I was gonna. That's what I was gonna say. Is sometimes the first step is you just gotta let go. I mean, I told my ego, "Hey, watch this, hold my beer." I went and said something nice to a lady, and instead I fell on my face and still walked home with her. So,
son, I don't think you have a line. I think you just talk them down and they ain't got a chance to say no, because I've seen you talk. I don't think you got to pick. I just don't think they get the opportunity to say, no, we're not doing that. Blah, blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
if you do, well, right, if you knew half the details, you would,
No,
you'd be
stop.
surprised
It's a
because I
family
wasn't able to
show.
talk.
Anyway, guys, it's food for thought. And that's really all I wanted to do is get some food for thought. It's 9 o'clock and I do appreciate everybody coming in. Tomorrow's Monday. Let's grab life by the nose and whip its ass and start crafting that image. We're all on a journey kind of off by ourselves. Find your partner, fucking craft that image of what you want to become. And don't be afraid to let that shit go. Don't be the symbolic death of those things that keep us where we are. It's okay to let it die. It's okay to set it free. And it's hard to do. And it's scary to do. It's really scary. I mean, if I didn't think I was important as I was, I don't know if, shit. But now that my warranty's expired, fuck. I will see all of you next time. If you're on my Patreon, I'm going to start doing I got some more videos to put up there. And then I'm going to start a YouTube channel reading from Big Book of Old Fairy Tales for the kiddos. Because there's some fun, there's some good stuff in there. And I got a new little fan. Her name is Izzy. And so I'm going to help do some neat things for her. So I appreciate everyone joining in tonight. Y'all have a good night. And I'm going to enjoy some of that Leisure of Kings. All right.
Have a good night, Brian.
Good night, guys.
Thanks,
All right, good
Brian.
night.
Brian,
Thank
it's good
you
seeing you
all.
again,
It's
man.
good to see
Great
everybody.
talking to
Good
you,
night,
John.
all.
Nice
you.
to see you.
Have a
Thank you,
good
Brian.
evening, everyone.
Thank you.